A hint of smugness, barely concealed, twisted Mom's lips. "What are you doing here?" she demanded, her stance rigid, offering no gesture of welcome. I lowered my gaze and, my voice trembling slightly as I'd practiced, I said, "I've been going through a rough patch, Mom. I lost my apartment, and I don't have anywhere to go right now. I was hoping I could stay here for a little while, just until I can find a job and get back on my feet." My parents exchanged a long, significant glance, and I could practically hear the gears of their minds turning, calculating the cost of my presence. Finally, Dad cleared his throat. "Well," he said, his voice hesitant but firm, "I suppose we could let you stay, but you'll have to pay rent, $800 a month. And you'll work around the house," Mom added quickly, her tone sharp, "like a maid. We're not running a charity here, you know." I nodded, keeping my eyes downcast to conceal the flash of anger that I knew would betray me. "I understand. Thank you," I mumbled. Before they could say anything more, footsteps echoed on the stairs, and my sister Bethany appeared with a man I assumed was her husband. At 29, Bethany looked almost exactly as I remembered her, except for a hardness etched around her eyes that hadn't been there before. Mom's face broke into a cold, triumphant grin when she saw me. Well, look who came crawling back," she sneered. "I knew you'd come begging sooner or later." I didn't respond to her taunt. Instead, I turned to Mom. "Where will I be staying?" Mom led me through the house to what used to be a storage room in the furthest corner of the first floor. She pushed open the door, revealing a tiny, cramped space containing only a cot, a rickety table, and a chair. "This is the most suitable place for you," she declared. I noticed she didn't use the word convenient, like she always did when describing Bethany's room. I stepped toward the room, ready to set down my small bag of belongings, when Mom's hand shot out and grabbed my arm. "Wait, roll up your sleeves. I want to see your arms." I understood immediately. They thought I might be a drug addict. Slowly, I pulled up my sleeves, carefully turning my wrists downward to hide my expensive watch and meticulously done manicure. Mom inspected my arms closely, searching for needle marks. Satisfied, she nodded curtly and released me. "Dinner's at 6, we'll be late," I asked, unable to keep a hint of bitterness from my voice. As soon as they left, I closed the door and sat heavily on the cot, which groaned under my weight. I looked around the dismal room and thought about how I'd ended up here. It wasn't because I was desperate or homeless. I was here because, a few days ago, I'd had a vivid dream about my Aunt Celia, Mom's sister, who had died of cancer 15 years ago. In the dream, she'd pleaded with me to reconcile with my family. Aunt Celia had been the only one who'd ever shown me real love in this house. When she was dying, she'd made Mom promise to use part of her inheritance for both Bethany's and my education. But when college time came, my parents claimed the money had run out, and they only had enough for Bethany's education. They chose her, just like they always had. Bethany was the golden child, the one who got new clothes while I got hand-me-downs, the one whose achievements were celebrated while mine were ignored, the one who was always believed over me in any dispute. When I protested about the college money, pointing out that they'd promised Aunt Celia, they called me ungrateful and kicked me out. I'd been 18, scared, and alone. I crashed with friends, worked multiple jobs, and eventually moved to another state. I saved enough to enroll in a public college, taking out student loans for the rest. I worked harder than I'd ever thought possible, studying at night while holding down jobs during the day. Now, 10 years later, I was the executive director of a major construction company, here to open a new branch. I had my own apartment, an expensive car, and a vacation home. I had made it despite them, not because of them. But that dream about Aunt Celia had shaken me. What if my parents had changed? What if reconciliation was possible? So I'd hatched this plan to see if they'd changed at all, to give them one more chance. Looking around the storage room they'd put me in, and listening to Bethany's laughter floating down the hallway, I was starting to think I had my answer. But I'd give them a week. 1 week to show me if there was anything worth salvaging here. The first week at my parents' house was exactly the punishment they intended it to be. Mom woke me at 5:30 every morning by pounding on my door. "Get up! Breakfast needs to be ready by 6:30, she'd bark through the thin wood. I dragged myself out of the uncomfortable cot that left my back aching and shuffled to the kitchen to prepare breakfast for everyone. Dad wanted his eggs just right, not too runny, not too firm. Bethany wouldn't eat anything with visible fat. Mom complained if her toast was even slightly darker than golden brown. I cooked in silence while they wandered in and out, not once offering to help. After they'd eaten, I'd clear the table and wash the dishes while they got ready for their days. Bethany worked at some local boutique, Dad at his accounting firm, and Mom volunteered at the church when she wasn't micromanaging everyone at home. "Don't forget to clean the bathrooms today," Mom said on my second morning, dropping a bucket of cleaning supplies at my feet before heading out. "And the windows need washing." I nodded meekly, playing my part. As soon as they left, I took one of my business outfits I'd hidden in my bag, stuffing it into a backpack along with my laptop. I told them I was going job hunting, but really I was heading to prepare for opening my company's new branch office. The temporary office space I'd rented was just a 10-minute drive from my parents' house. I parked my expensive car at a secure garage across town and took the bus each day to maintain my cover. When I arrived at the office in my scuffed secondhand clothes, my regional manager, Tom, raised his eyebrows but said nothing. "Maybe she's one of those eccentric rich people," I overheard one employee whisper to another. "You know, like Mark Zuckerberg, wearing the same t-shirt every day." I smiled to myself. If only they knew the real reason. My days were productive despite the charade. We secured permits, interviewed local contractors, and began the marketing strategy for the branch opening. I made sure to schedule all my important meetings during the day and left the paperwork for evenings in my dismal room. Every evening when I returned home, my family was already eating dinner. They never waited for me. On the counter would be a plate of leftovers. Usually the parts nobody wanted: gristly meat, overcooked vegetables, the burnt bottom of a casserole. "There's your dinner," my mother would say without looking up. "We already ate. You were late." I'd thank them politely, take the plate to my room, and immediately dump it in a garbage bag I kept hidden under the cot. I was never actually hungry, having enjoyed lunch and an early dinner at nice restaurants before returning each night. On the third night, Bethany followed me to my room. "So what happened to you?" she asked, leaning against the door frame with her arms crossed. "Drugs, gambling, or are you just too stupid to keep a job?" I set my plate down and looked at her. "Nothing like that, just had some bad luck." She snorted. "Yeah, right. I always knew you'd end up like this. Mom and Dad were smart not to waste money on your college. Look how I turned out," she gestured to herself. "Married, nice husband, good job. And you?" She waved dismissively at my surroundings. "Just a failure like we all predicted." I bit my tongue to keep from revealing the truth. How I made more in a month than she probably made in a year. How my apartment had 3 bedrooms and a view of the city. How I'd paid off my student loans years ago and now had a healthy investment portfolio. Instead, I just shrugged. As the week progressed, the jabs became more frequent and cruel. Dad accidentally knocked over my few belongings multiple times. Mom constantly reminded me how much I was costing them by being there, despite my cooking and cleaning for free. Bethany made it a point to mention her successful life whenever I was within earshot. On Thursday night, I sat alone in my room after another exhausting day of pretending. I took out my phone, a cheap prepaid one I'd bought for the charade, not my actual smartphone, and scrolled through photos I'd transferred of my real life. My beautiful apartment, my office with the view, the charity gala I'd attended last month in a designer gown. I thought about Aunt Celia and her final wish for family reconciliation. She'd been my only ally in this house. When I was 15 and she was dying, she'd made Mom promise in front of everyone to use part of her inheritance for both Bethany's and my education. Mom had agreed tearfully, holding her sister's hand. 3 years later, she'd claimed the money had run out, just in time for my education, but not Bethany's. I wondered what Aunt Celia would think now, seeing how they treated me. Would she still want me to reconcile with them? Or would she understand that some relationships can't be fixed because the other people don't want them fixed? By Friday, I'd made my decision. They hadn't changed. If anything, they'd gotten worse, more entitled, more cruel, more smug in their belief that I deserved nothing while Bethany deserved everything. The experiment was over. I left work early that day and stopped at Shearwater, the most expensive restaurant in town. I ordered an extravagant takeout meal: filet mignon, lobster thermidor, roasted vegetables with truffle butter, chocolate souffle, and a bottle of champagne, which I asked them to uncork and put in a carafe, claiming it was for a surprise party. When I arrived at the house, everyone was in the living room watching TV. I walked past them to the dining room and began setting the table with the food I'd brought. The smell drew them in quickly. "What's all this?" Dad asked, eyeing the food suspiciously. "Dinner," I said simply. "I thought we could all eat together tonight." Bethany sniffed the air and then looked at me with narrowed eyes. "Did you steal this? Or were you washing dishes at Shearwater all week instead of job hunting?" I smiled calmly. "Let's sit down. I have something to tell you all." As they took their places at the table, eyeing the gourmet food hungrily, I knew the time for pretense was over. 1 week had been more than enough to confirm what I already knew. They hadn't changed, and they never would. The dining room fell silent as everyone filled their plates with the gourmet food I brought. My father poured himself a generous serving of the champagne, not bothering to offer any to me. Mom and Bethany exchanged glances as they sampled the lobster thermidor, their eyes widening at the taste. I took a small sip of water. "I have something to tell you all. After dinner, I'm leaving." Mom's fork paused halfway to her mouth. "Leaving? Where would you go? Did you find some guy with a place to live?" Her lips curled into a mocking smile. "Or maybe you're heading to a homeless shelter." "Actually," I said calmly, setting down my napkin, "I'm going to the Grand Imperial Hotel." There was a moment of stunned silence before Bethany burst out laughing. "The Grand Imperial? That place costs like $500 a night. Stop making us laugh, Abby." I reached into my pocket and pulled out my business card, setting it on the table. Abigail Wilson, Executive Director, Wilson Construction Corporation. Dad snatched up the card, his eyes narrowing as he read it. "Is this some kind of joke?" "The joke," I said, "was me showing up here in secondhand clothes, pretending to be down on my luck. I'm not homeless or jobless. I'm here to open a new branch of my company." Bethany grabbed the card from Dad. "This is a great prank, Abby. You really had us going." But her voice lacked conviction as she stared at the embossed lettering. "It's not a prank," I replied. "I've been the executive director for 3 years now. I have my own apartment, an expensive car, and a vacation home upstate." Mom's face had gone pale. "But why would you pretend?" "Because I had a dream about Aunt Celia," I cut in. "She asked me to reconcile with you all. I thought maybe after 10 years you might have changed. That maybe we could start over, but I needed to see who you really were first." The silence that followed was deafening. My father's face had turned an alarming shade of red, while my mother's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. "You were testing us?" Bethany finally sputtered, her voice rising. "Who do you think you are?" "I'm someone who left home at 18 with nothing," I said evenly. "Someone who worked multiple jobs while taking out student loans to put myself through your college. Someone who climbed from entry level to executive director through hard work and determination. And apparently, I'm someone who was foolish enough to think you might have become better people after all these years." I stood up from the table. "But you haven't changed. You're still the same people who always favored Bethany over me, who broke your promise to Aunt Celia about my education, who kicked me out when I dared to point out the unfairness. If anything, you've gotten worse." "Now wait just a minute," Dad started, but I held up my hand. "No, I'm done waiting. I've given you a week of my time, cooking your meals, cleaning your house, listening to your insults. That's more than enough." I walked to my small room and retrieved my hidden bag with my real clothes and belongings. When I returned to the dining room, they were all standing, looking shocked and confused. "You can't just leave like this," Mom said, her voice suddenly soft. "We're your family." "You haven't been my family since the day you told me you had money for Bethany's education but not mine," I replied. "When you chose her over me like you always did." I headed for the front door, but Mom grabbed my arm. "Abby, please, we can work this out. We're sorry." "No, you're not," I said gently, removing her hand. "You're sorry you didn't know I was successful. You're sorry you missed your chance to benefit from my success. But you're not sorry for how you treated me. Not then, and not this past week." I opened the door and turned back one last time. "Goodbye. Don't try to contact me." The cool evening air felt cleansing as I walked away from the house. Hearing the door slam behind me, I got into the Uber I'd called and directed the driver to the Grand Imperial Hotel. As I checked in, my phone began buzzing with notifications. They were calling the number on my business card. Just as I'd expected, I silenced the phone and took the elevator to my suite. Once inside, I kicked off the scuffed secondhand shoes and took a long, hot shower, washing away the last traces of my week in that house. Wrapped in the hotel's plush robe, I finally checked my messages. There were 6 voicemails and 12 text messages from my parents and Bethany. I listened to the first voicemail. "Abby, it's Mom. Please call us back. We're sorry for how things went. We've always loved you. Please give us another chance." The next was from Dad. "Abigail, this is your father. What happened tonight was a misunderstanding. We had no idea about your success. We're proud of you, really. Call us back." Bethany's message was the most revealing. "Hey, Abby, look. I didn't mean what I said about you're just a failure. I was just surprised. We all were. I've missed you, you know? All those jokes, I was just teasing. We were trying to teach you a lesson for running away at 18. Call me back, okay?" I deleted all the messages without listening to the rest. The next morning, I woke up feeling lighter than I had in days. I ordered room service, enjoyed a leisurely breakfast, and then changed into my regular clothes. A tailored suit and heels that cost more than what my parents claimed I owed them for a month's rent. At the office, I was greeted with respect by my team. No one questioned my authority or belittled my achievements. No one treated me like I was worth less than anyone else. "The contractors will be ready to break ground next month," Tom reported during our morning meeting. "We're on schedule and under budget." I nodded, making notes. "Excellent. I'll be staying in town for the next few weeks to oversee the initial setup." As the meeting concluded, I felt a sense of satisfaction. This branch would be successful, like all the others I'd helped establish. My work here was important and valued. Back in my hotel room that evening, I thought about Aunt Celia and her wish for family reconciliation. I hoped she would understand that I had tried. I had given them a chance to show they had changed, but they had failed that test spectacularly. The next 4 weeks flew by as I threw myself into work. Every day was packed with meetings, site visits, and preparations for the branch opening. I stayed at the Grand Imperial the entire time, enjoying the luxuries I'd earned through years of hard work. No more cold storage room with a creaky cot. No more leftover scraps for dinner. No more insults thinly disguised as family banter. My parents tried to reach me through every possible channel. They showed up at my office twice, but security had instructions not to let them in. They sent emails that went straight to my spam folder. They even tried to contact me through social media, creating new accounts when I blocked their old ones. Bethany was the most persistent. She left handwritten notes at the hotel reception, sent flowers to my office, and once even waited in the lobby of a restaurant where I was having a business lunch. "Abby, please," she'd said, approaching my table. "Just give us 5 minutes." I'd simply signal the maitre d', who promptly escorted her out. My lunch companion, a potential contractor, raised an eyebrow. "Family drama," I explained briefly. "Not worth discussing." He nodded understandingly. "I have a brother I haven't spoken to in 15 years. Sometimes distance is the only solution." One evening, as I was reviewing blueprints in my hotel suite, I received a call from a familiar number. It was my cousin, Rachel. She was my mother's brother's daughter, the only family member I'd kept in sporadic contact with over the years. She'd been sympathetic to my situation, but was 8 years younger than me and still a child when I left home. "Hey, Rachel, how are you?" "I'm good. Listen, I thought you should know what's happening with the family. They're telling everyone that you're ungrateful and greedy. Aunt Karen and Uncle John are saying you got rich but refused to help them. Ma is telling people you've become too big for your britches and forgotten where you came from." I laughed softly. "Of course they are." "Doesn't it bother you?" Rachel asked. "They're ruining your reputation in town." "No one whose opinion I value would believe them," I replied, "and I don't live here anymore anyway." "Well, I told them they were full of it," Rachel said defiantly. "I told them I've been keeping in touch with you for years and that you paid for my textbooks last semester when Dad lost his job." After hanging up, I walked to the window and looked out at the town where I'd grown up. From this height, It looked peaceful, almost idyllic, but I knew better now. The next day, I visited Aunt Celia's grave. The cemetery was quiet, just the sound of leaves rustling in the gentle breeze. I laid flowers on her headstone and sat on the small bench nearby. "Aunt Celia," I said softly, "I came back and gave them a chance, just like you asked in my dream, but they haven't changed. If anything, they're worse." A warm breeze suddenly swept around me, and I closed my eyes. In that moment, I felt a sense of peace wash over me. Maybe Aunt Celia understood. Maybe she was giving me permission to let go. I stayed there for almost an hour, thinking about the past and the future. When I finally stood to leave, I felt lighter somehow. The burden of family obligation that had weighed on me since that dream was gone. I was free. 2 days later, we broke ground on the new branch office. It was a clear, sunny day, perfect for the ceremony. Local business leaders and politicians attended, eager to welcome a major company to their town. I gave a short speech about growth and community investment, careful to avoid any personal references to my connection to the town. As we posed for photos with the ceremonial shovels, I spotted them at the edge of the crowd, my parents and Bethany, watching with unreadable expressions. I didn't acknowledge them, continuing with my professional duties as if they were just any other onlookers. That evening, I packed my bags. The branch was officially launched, staffed with competent local management, and ready to operate without my daily presence. My work here was done. As I checked out of the hotel, the receptionist handed me an envelope. "This was left for you this morning, Ms. Wilson." Inside was a letter from my mother. I almost threw it away unread, but curiosity got the better of me. It was short. "Abby, we know we don't deserve your forgiveness. What we did to you was wrong, both 10 years ago and when you came back. We can't change the past, but we want you to know we're proud of what you've accomplished, even if we had no part in it. If you ever decide to give us another chance, our door is open. Love, Mom." I folded the letter and tucked it into my purse, not because I planned to respond, but because it represented the closest thing to an honest admission I'd ever received from them. It wasn't enough, not nearly enough, but it was something. My driver loaded my luggage into the car, and I took one last look at the town before getting in. There was a time when I'd imagined a triumphant return here, showing everyone who doubted me what I'd accomplished. But the reality had been different. Better in some ways, worse in others. As we drove toward the highway that would take me back to my real home, my phone chimed with a message from Tom. "Branch operations running smoothly. The team sends their thanks for your leadership." I smiled. This was my legacy in this town. Not the broken family relationships, but a thriving business that would provide jobs and opportunities for years to come. That was something to be proud of. 3 hours later, I walked into my spacious apartment, kicking off my heels and letting out a contented sigh. The familiar surroundings welcomed me back. This was home, the place I'd built for myself, not the place that had rejected me. I poured myself a glass of wine and settled on my balcony, watching the city lights twinkle below. My phone buzzed with a text from Rachel. "Did you make it home okay?" "Just got in," I replied. "Thanks for checking. Love you, cuz." She responded, "Love you too, boss." I typed it and meant it. I set my phone down and gazed at the night sky. 10 years ago, I'd left town with nothing but determination and hurt. Now, I was returning to my life with something else: closure. I had tried to reconcile with my family and discovered that sometimes the best family is the one you create for yourself. Valuable lesson. This story highlights the importance of self-worth and the courage to prioritize your well-being, even when it means letting go of toxic family relationships. Sometimes the desire for reconciliation clashes with the reality of unchanged behavior, and true strength lies in recognizing when to create your own fulfilling life, independent of those who consistently diminish you. What are your thoughts on Abigail's decision? Have you ever faced a similar situation? Share your experiences in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this story, please subscribe to our channel for more compelling narratives.